DaMommio. This is things I realized on finding an alien in the passenger seat of my car. 3.5 hours to interview, 270 miles to LA, 94 miles per hour. The mass of writhing tentacles that slithered onto the passenger seat a minute ago probably isn't a hallucination. Correction, given that I had to blow into a tube to start this rental, it's not an alcoholic hallucination. This is 7 miles per hour faster than I've ever driven before in my life. A guy's weekend in Vegas, when I had a job interview scheduled for Monday, was probably a mistake. No matter how much Gary said I needed it. Courting a tequila hangover last night was definitely a mistake. There's an iridescent purple ring on my left hand that I do not recognize. There's a matching ring on one of the tentacles. There are at least 4 alien embassies in Vegas, and a hell of a lot of wedding chapels. 3 years of grad school did not prepare me for this. I'm never going to Vegas with Gary again. So this one's about a guy who's made a series of bad decisions, getting flustered and making some more. And it developed, like a lot of stories that I write, from a weird what if. I was brainstorming for a contest, and I came up with this idea of a guy getting drunk and accidentally marrying an alien. And I wanted to try and come up with something that would explain or justify that. And along the way, that developed into, I thought it'd be funnier if it wasn't, he wasn't really married to it, he just thinks he is. And then, what if it wasn't even an intelligent alien? The gulf of understanding was even greater. What if it was more like a pet? And I wrote the first version for a contest that had a 750-word limit. So that really drove me to make it very short. And that helped drive towards coming up with a list format. And I've done list stories before, but I like this idea of a series of realizations. And then later on revision, ended up with the sort of headers that demarcate different stages of speed of the car and things like that. So it's a bit of a puzzle. I like the idea that you have to infer what's going on. You just have to have this sparse bit of information. You have to figure out what's actually happening. And then I kept adding stressors to it. So that was a bit of the plot development. It was just things like the fact that he's on his way to an interview, that he's driving fast, everything's going on at once. And, the image of this alien thing, slithering onto the seat of his car, and he doesn't know what's going on. So, yeah. Well, I've been working on very short pieces, and I'm kind of slowly trying to make them longer, which requires more structure, more plot. So I'm moving towards adding more complications and more things happening. But that's after I sort of started out with middling length stories and sprawling stories that never ended. And I'm kind of happy with what moving to very short things has done in terms of focus. I feel like the things like the contest I was talking about with a 750-word limit really require you to boil down your idea to a very tight kernel. And then if that's done strong, then you can expand it and make something else out of it. But as I move towards things more like 5,000-word stories, not the same kinds of things aren't going to work. So I'm now looking again at scene sequel structure and ways to link scenes, and have that multiple scene structure contribute to the larger conclusions. So that's what I'm thinking about now. I just had experience with a recent story that was published in Metaphorosis called Vacation Gnomes that went through a lengthy rewrite with the editor. And this is the first time I've done, I've had a request for rewrite and done it. It was a very positive experience. Every time I would get feedback from the editor, I was looking at it thinking, am I going to want to do this time? But I agreed with the guy every time. And when I understood what he was asking for, I really felt like it enhanced the story. And that makes me believe that most of my pieces that haven't been published have suffered from being underwritten. and that I'm seeing now more and more that a lot of emotion isn't really on the page; it's in my head. I've always been aware that the reader takes away something different, but I'm very struck with that recently. That how easy it is after weeks of working on a story to, when you have the total picture at every step of the way, to not get the same experience that a reader who moves linearly through the story gets. So I'm kind of just happy to be able to see that. I can look at older stories and I can see some flaws in them now. So I think that I'm learning something there, and I'm happy about it. I would focus on coming up with a character with a vital need. For me, I'm often thinking about weird characters in weird situations. I mean, that's common to lots of speculative fiction, but I've seen that sometimes I end up with a character who isn't well suited to the reader experience. So, it's good to take a step back and see if this character, if you're setting up a plot in which this character is vital, does this character have agency? I had one story that has never sold, and its main character is kind of on a death march. He's moving inexorably towards death, and that's it's extreme, and it's tragic, and it's potentially exciting, but it's not it's not positive at all. And so presumably I would need to do lots of other things to make that character interesting to the reader, or to make that story satisfying, or do something different. So those are the kinds of things I think about. I feel like it's really important to think about your character's motivations, line those up with their opposition and so forth. And the most really the sort of general advice that I keep coming back to comes from books by Lisa Cron that talk about making sure a character has an inner issue. Essentially, they want something very badly, and there's something about there's some misperception, something they've got wrong, a belief about themselves perhaps that's wrong, that gets in the way of that. And so then it's satisfying for the reader when the character is able to overcome that and come to a better place, come to a place of truth, and potentially unlocking their own potential by doing so. Breaking through this thing that was in their way. Yeah. So I don't really think about books or movies in this respect, but short stories, and I do refer back to short stories a lot. And one of the things that's been exciting in the last, say, 10 years is the explosion of online stuff. So the experience, that used to be where you'd get a book with a short story in it. Maybe you get a collection of short stories, you read several of them, but unless you keep careful records, you might forget the details, forget the title, and maybe not find that again. But nowadays, it's often on a web page. You can store a link. You can copy the full text of the thing to a file. You can analyze it. So it's made it. It's just really amenable to analysis. And so one of the things I do is just make a list of stories that I really like and refer back to them. I'm thinking now I've got so many in this list, about 30 now, but I might want to start putting keywords or something, get really organized there. But anyway, that also means I guess another thing I like to do with the text of stories is to sometimes retype them. As a reader, someone who reads a ton from an early age, I've got to read very quickly. And now I'll do things like retyping a story in order to force myself to look hard at every word, and just also take another trip through it. And with some of the stories that I have returned to over and over again, I found that the really good ones, it's very difficult to not just get caught up in the story again. So that's a technique that can be useful for that as well. Well, so I guess the main thing I'd want to mention would be the online writing group Codex, which I highly recommend to anybody.